The shot was impossible. 800 meters through crosswind, target moving between structures, elevation change of 200 feet. Every sniper on that mountain knew it could not be made. Staff Sergeant Miriam Okonkwo made it anyway. That was kill 219. That was the moment they stopped calling her the Shadow and started calling her Angel. But 3 months earlier, when she stepped off the Chinook at Forward Operating Base Warrior in the mountains of Paktika Province, the only thing anyone called her was a mistake. The rotors were still spinning when she heard it. A voice from the group of soldiers waiting on the landing zone, not quite quiet enough to be hidden beneath the engine noise. She will never make it. Miriam did not turn to see who said it. She had heard variations of those words her entire career, and she had learned that looking for the source only gave the speaker power. Instead, she shouldered her rucksack, checked that her rifle case was secure, and walked toward the command post like she had walked into every other hostile environment in her life. Chin level, eyes forward. Let them watch. The FOB was smaller than she expected. A cluster of plywood buildings and concrete barriers carved into a valley between two massive peaks that the soldiers called the Twins. Everything was brown. The mountains, the buildings, the faces of the men who stopped what they were doing to stare as she passed. She had been the only woman on her last deployment, too, but this felt different. This felt like walking into a room where everyone had already decided the verdict before the trial began. Before we continue with Miriam's story, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you know someone who was told they would never make it, but proved everyone wrong. The command post was a reinforced structure at the center of the FOB, and inside, she found chaos. Maps covered every surface. Radio chatter filled the air. Officers moved between stations with the particular urgency of men who had not slept in days. She found the first sergeant's desk and reported in, and Adele Contreras looked up from a stack of paperwork with eyes that had seen everything and were surprised by nothing. Staff Sergeant Okonkwo reporting as ordered, Miriam said. Contreras studied her for a moment. The first sergeant was perhaps 40, with silver threading through black hair and the kind of bearing that came from decades of proving herself in rooms that did not want her there. Finally, she nodded. Welcome to Warrior. Your team leader is Sergeant First Class Hendricks. He is in the Sniper Bay, Building 7. Something in the way she said the name made Miriam pause. Thank you, First Sergeant. Okonkwo. Contreras stopped her before she reached the door. Her voice dropped. You are the best shooter I have seen in 20 years. I read your qualification scores. I know what you can do. But knowing and believing are different things, and the men here have not seen it yet. They will doubt you. Some of them will try to break you. Do not let them. Miriam met her eyes. I never have. Building 7 was on the eastern edge of the FOB, a low structure with reinforced walls and blackout curtains over the windows. Inside, she found 4 men cleaning weapons and checking equipment. They looked up when she entered, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The largest of them stood. He was over 6 feet tall with a neck like a tree trunk and pale eyes that assessed her the way a predator assesses prey that has wandered into the wrong territory. The name tape on his chest read Hendricks. You must be the replacement, he said. His voice carried the particular contempt of someone who had already made up his mind. I requested a sniper. They sent me a public relations stunt. Staff Sergeant Okonkwo, she said, keeping her voice level. 11 Bravo with B4 qualification. 2 deployments. Ready to work. Ready to work. Hendricks smiled, but there was no warmth in it. He looked at the other men. You hear that, boys? She's ready to work. He turned back to her. This is not some training range back home, sweetheart. This is the real thing. Haji out there does not care about your qualification scores or whatever diversity box the Army needed to check. He cares about killing Americans. And when the bullets start flying, I need people I can trust to perform. Then watch me perform, Miriam said. She held his gaze without blinking. She had learned a long time ago that men like Hendricks fed on visible reaction. Give them nothing and they starved. A younger soldier in the corner cleared his throat. He was wiry, with kind eyes behind Army-issue glasses. The name tape read Washington. I can show her the equipment bay. Sergeant, get her squared away. Hendricks waved dismissively. Fine. Get her settled. He leaned close to Miriam as she passed, close enough that only she could hear. Listen carefully. I have been doing this for 12 years. I have trained more snipers than you have met. And I'm telling you right now, you do not belong here. You will fail. You will get someone killed. And when that happens, I will make sure everyone knows exactly whose fault it was. Miriam did not flinch. She looked at him with the same calm she brought to every shot. The calm her grandfather had taught her in the frozen Michigan woods when she was 8 years old. The calm that had made her the most accurate shooter in her battalion. I guess we will see, she said. Washington led her out of the building and into the harsh Afghan sunlight. He waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. That is just how he is. He does not think women belong in combat roles. Old school mentality. And what do you think? Miriam asked. Washington was quiet for a moment. I think I have seen a lot of good soldiers out here, and none of them look the same. He extended his hand. Jerome Washington. Most people call me Monk. I'm supposed to be your spotter. She shook it. Monk. Like the detective. Like the seminary I almost finished before I enlisted. He shrugged. Long story. Across the FOB, she saw a young private struggling with a piece of equipment, his hands shaking so badly he could not secure the straps on his vest. The soldiers around him ignored his difficulty or pretended not to notice. Give me a minute, Miriam said to Monk. She walked over to the private, whose name tape read Nguyen. His face was pale, and up close she could see he was barely out of his teens. First deployment? She asked quietly. He nodded, not meeting her eyes. I keep messing up. I cannot make my hand stop shaking. Miriam did not tell him the shaking would stop. She did not offer false comfort. Instead, she took the strap from his hands and showed him a simpler technique, one that did not require fine motor control. Your hands shake because your body knows you are in danger, she said. That is not weakness. That is survival. The trick is not to stop the shaking. The trick is to work with it instead of against it. He looked at her for the first time. Who are you? Someone who shook for an entire year before she learned to hold still. She secured the final strap and stepped back. You'll be fine, Private. Just breathe. When she returned to Monk, he was watching her with a different expression than before. Something that might have been the beginning of respect. That night, in her bunk in the female quarters, Miriam pulled out a worn photograph. Her younger sister Esther, smiling in her nursing school scrubs. The tuition Miriam's deployment pay was covering. The reason she was here, in this place where no one wanted her. She kissed the photograph and put it away. In Building 7, Hendricks sat with his team, cleaning a rifle that did not need cleaning. His hands moved automatically while his mind worked on a different kind of problem. She qualified expert, one of the snipers said. Broke the range record at Benning. Records do not mean anything out here, Hendricks replied. He held up a small file and examined it in the light. Combat is different. Pressure is different. She will crack. He smiled, and in the dim light, it looked almost like something else. And if she does not crack on her own, well, equipment fails in combat all the time. The first week at FOB Warrior taught Miriam that survival required more than skill with a rifle. It required learning the rhythms of a place that did not want her there. She learned which paths to take to avoid Hendricks and his crew. She learned which soldiers would meet her eyes and which would look through her like she did not exist. She learned that the Chow Hall grew quiet when she entered and loud again when she left. But she also learned that Monk was different. He met her at the range on her second day, carrying her spotter scope and a notebook filled with handwritten observations about the local terrain. Wind patterns, he explained as they walked. This valley funnels everything. Morning winds come from the east, afternoon from the west. The mountains create thermals that can push a bullet 2 feet at distance. He glanced at her. Most snipers take weeks to figure that out. You mapped all of this yourself, Miriam asked. Monk shrugged. I like patterns. Besides, I figured whoever they sent as my new shooter would need the information. I did not expect. He stopped himself. You did not expect a woman. I did not expect someone who broke the Benning record. He said it without irony. I have been doing this for 3 years. I have never worked with anyone who shoots like your file says you shoot. So I decided to reserve judgment until I see it for myself. It was the closest thing to fairness she had encountered since arriving. "Fair enough," she said. "Then let me show you." She set up on the firing line and began her zero confirmation. The process of ensuring her rifle's scope was perfectly calibrated to her ammunition and the local conditions. The range stretched out before her, targets set at 200, 400, and 600 meters. Standard distances. Nothing that should challenge a qualified sniper. She took her first shot at 200 meters. Set her mass. The sound echoed off the mountains and faded into silence. Monk studied the target through his scope. Dead center. Adjust .2 right for the wind. She made the adjustment and fired again. Another center hit. They worked through the distances methodically, and with each shot Monk grew quieter. By the time she reached 600 meters, he had stopped offering corrections entirely. There was nothing to correct. "That is not normal," he said finally. His voice had changed. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like awe. "I have worked with 12 snipers. Good ones. None of them shoot like that. My grandfather taught me," Miriam said. She was field stripping her rifle, her hands moving with automatic precision. "We hunted deer in Michigan when I was a kid. He used to say that the bullet knows where it wants to go. Your job is just to stop fighting it." Monk was quiet for a moment. "That is either the most profound thing I have ever heard or complete nonsense." Miriam almost smiled. Maybe both. That night she returned to her quarters to find her equipment bag open on her bunk. Someone had been through her things. Her clothes were scattered, her personal items disturbed. But the real violation was her rifle case. The locks had been forced. She opened the case and examined her weapon with the careful attention of someone whose life depended on every component functioning perfectly. At first nothing seemed wrong. Then she saw it. A hairline scratch on the inside of the barrel, near the chamber. Faint enough to miss on casual inspection. Deep enough to affect accuracy at distance. Sabotage. She could report it. Go to First Sergeant Contreras, file a complaint, demand an investigation. But she knew how that would end. No proof. Her word against theirs. And the label of troublemaker following her for the rest of her career. Instead, she retrieved her cleaning kit and began the slow process of repairing the damage. It took 3 hours, working by flashlight, using techniques her grandfather had taught her for maintaining weapons in the field. By the time she finished, the scratch was gone. The rifle would shoot true, but she did not sleep that night. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the kind of man who would sabotage a fellow soldier's weapon in a combat zone. The kind of man who hated so deeply that he would risk lives to prove a point. The next morning, Hendricks found her in the chow hall. He sat down across from her uninvited, his tray loaded with food, his smile loaded with malice. "How are you settling in, Okonkwo? Finding everything you need?" She met his eyes. "Equipment is squared away, Sergeant. Ready for patrol." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or disappointment. "Good, because you're going outside the wire today. Sector 7. We have reports of spotter activity on the ridgeline." He leaned forward. "Think you can handle it?" "I can handle anything you give me. We will see." The patrol assembled at 0900. 8 soldiers plus Miriam and Monk, moving in 2 vehicles through the valley toward the eastern ridge. The terrain was brutal. Sheer cliffs and narrow passes that offered 1,000 places for an ambush. Miriam rode in the second vehicle, her rifle ready, her eyes scanning every shadow. Monk sat beside her, his spotter scope in his lap. "You know he is testing you," he said quietly. "Sector 7 is hot. We have taken contact there 3 times this month." "Good," Miriam replied. "Then I will have something to shoot at." They reached their observation point at 10:30, a rocky outcrop overlooking a village that intelligence suspected of harboring insurgent fighters. Miriam set up her rifle while Monk established their sight lines. The waiting began. 2 hours passed. The sun climbed higher and the heat became suffocating. Miriam did not move. She did not shift, did not complain, did not reach for water. She simply watched. Monk had seen patient snipers before, but this was something different. This was stillness that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than training. "How do you do that?" he asked finally. "Not moving for hours. It would drive me crazy." Miriam kept her eye on the scope. My grandfather used to take me hunting in January, 20 below zero. He would make me sit in a blind for 8 hours without moving. He said the cold would teach me what my mind could not, and did it. It taught me that discomfort is just information. You can acknowledge it without obeying it. Before Monk could respond, his scope caught movement. Contact, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. 11 o'clock, 700 meters. 2 individuals with long rifles moving toward the village. Miriam shifted her aim fractionally. She saw them. 2 men in dark clothing, carrying weapons that were definitely not farming tools. They were moving with the careful deliberation of people who knew they were being watched. I have them, she said. The radio crackled. Hendrik's voice came through, cold and commanding. Okonkwo, do you have eyes on the targets? Affirmative. 2 armed individuals. 700 meters. I have a clean shot. A pause. Then, almost reluctantly, weapons free, she exhaled slowly. The crosshairs settled. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. She felt her heartbeat slow, felt the space between beats stretch into eternity. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. The bullet knows where it wants to go. She squeezed the trigger. The first target dropped. Before his companion could react, she had chambered another round and fired again. The second target fell. Silence on the radio. Then Monk's voice, barely above a whisper. 2 for 2. Center mass on both. 700 meters. He looked at her with an expression she would remember for the rest of her life. It was the expression of a man who had just watched something impossible become real. And somewhere on the FOB, listening to the radio traffic, Hendricks heard it too. His hands tightened on the receiver until his knuckles went white. She had made her first kills, and she had made them look easy. Word traveled fast on a small FOB. By the time the patrol returned to base, half the soldiers at Warrior had heard about the woman sniper who dropped 2 targets at 700 meters in under 3 seconds. Some said it was luck. Some said the distances were exaggerated. But in the Tactical Operations Center, the radio logs told a different story, and the men who had been on that patrol were not exaggerating when they described what they had seen. Miriam did not celebrate. She filed her after-action report, cleaned her weapon, and returned to her quarters without speaking to anyone. Monk found her there an hour later, sitting on her bunk, staring at the wall. You good? He asked from the doorway. She did not answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than he had ever heard it. I killed 2 men today. Monk stepped inside and closed the door. He had seen this before. The moment when the reality of taking a life settled into a soldier's bones. Some people broke under that weight. Others buried it so deep they forgot it was there. He did not know yet which kind Miriam would be. They were armed, he said. They were moving toward a village full of civilians. If you had not taken those shots, people would have died. Innocent people. I know. She finally looked at him. That is not what I'm struggling with. I knew when I enlisted that this job meant killing. I made peace with that a long time ago. What I'm struggling with is how easy it was. She held up her hands, steady as stone. No checking. No hosetashchen. I saw them. I shot them. They fell. And I felt nothing. Monk was quiet for a moment. Maybe that is a gift. Or maybe it means something is wrong with me. He sat down on the footlocker across from her. While I was in seminary, we studied the concept of righteous purpose. The idea that some acts, even violent ones, can be justified when they serve a greater good. He paused. I dropped out because I could not reconcile that with what I saw in the world. Too much violence justified by people who claimed righteousness. But watching you today, I saw something different. What did you see? Someone who does not enjoy killing. Someone who does it because it needs to be done, and because she can do it better than anyone else. He leaned forward. That is not something wrong with you, Okonkwo. That is something rare. She considered his words. Her grandfather had said something similar once, after she shot her first deer. He had told her that the ability to take life without hatred was a burden, not a gift. That it meant she would be called upon to do things others could not. She had been 12 years old, and she had not understood. Now, at 29, she was beginning to. Thank you, Monk, she said finally. He nodded and stood. Get some rest. Hendricks already has us on the rotation for tomorrow. Sector 4 this time. He smiled slightly. Apparently, someone decided you are not completely useless after all. The next 3 weeks established a rhythm. Patrols, observation posts, long hours of waiting punctuated by brief moments of violence. Miriam's kill count climbed steadily. 3 became 7. 7 became 12. 12 became 15. Each shot was clean, precise, and documented. Each shot was harder for Hendricks to dismiss. But he tried anyway. Lucky shots, he told Captain Rawlings in the operations center one evening. Miriam was not supposed to be there, but she had arrived early for a briefing and stood outside the door, listening. Anyone can hit a stationary target at distance. I want to see what happens when she faces real pressure. Her record suggests she handles pressure fine, Rawlings replied. His voice was neutral, neither defending nor attacking. She has more confirmed kills in 3 weeks than most snipers get in a deployment. Confirmed by who? Her spotter. Washington has been in her pocket since day one. How do we know he is not inflating her numbers to make her look good? There was a pause. Are you suggesting fraud? Sergeant, I am suggesting that we should verify independently. Send someone else with her. Someone who will give an honest assessment. And who would you recommend? Another pause. Hendricks' voice shifted, taking on a tone of false reluctance. I could go myself. Keep an eye on things. Make sure everything is above board. Miriam had heard enough. She stepped into the operations center before Rawlings could respond. Captain, Sergeant, I apologize for the interruption, but I could not help overhearing. Hendricks' face flushed. This is a private conversation, au conquo, about me. She kept her voice level, professional. If Sergeant Hendricks has concerns about my performance, I welcome his oversight. In fact, I insist on it. Let him come on the next patrol. Let him watch. She met Hendricks' eyes. I have nothing to hide. Rawlings looked between them, reading the tension. Fine. Tomorrow's patrol in Sector 9. Hendricks, you will accompany Okonkwo's team as an observer. He stood. I want a full report afterward. Accurate and objective. Dismissed. Outside the operations center, Hendricks caught her arm. She did not pull away, but she did not yield either. You think you're clever, he hissed. You think calling my bluff makes you look strong. But all you did was give me a front row seat to watch you fail. Then I guess you will have excellent visibility when I prove you wrong. She walked away before he could respond. Her hands were steady, but inside her chest, something was burning. Not fear, something older and hotter. The same fire that had driven her through every obstacle the army had placed in her path. The same fire that had made her the best shooter in her battalion despite every voice telling her she did not belong. Tomorrow she would show Hendricks exactly what she was capable of, and she would make sure he could never deny it again. That night, she cleaned her rifle 3 times, checking every component for signs of tampering. She found nothing, but she did not trust it. She slept with the weapon beside her, one hand resting on the stock. In Building 7, Hendricks sat alone, a small file in his hand. He turned it over and over, watching the light catch the metal edge. The same kind of file that had scratched her barrel 2 weeks ago. The scratch she had somehow repaired. He had underestimated her. That was a mistake he would not make again. Tomorrow in Sector 9, there would be no witnesses who mattered. No radio logs that could not be explained. Just the chaos of combat, where accidents happened all the time. He set the file down and began to plan. Outside, the Afghan night stretched cold and silent over the mountains. The Twin Peaks stood black against the stars. And somewhere in the valley below, enemy fighters were watching the FOB, learning its patterns, waiting for their moment. They had heard about the woman sniper too, the one the Americans called Shadow, the one who never missed. They were making plans of their own. Sector 9 was a nightmare of broken terrain and blind corners. The patrol moved through a narrow pass between 2 ridge lines, exposed and vulnerable, with Hendricks positioned directly behind Miriam the entire way. She could feel his eyes on her back like a physical weight, watching, waiting for her to make a mistake he could report. She did not give him one. The first contact came at 1100 hours. Gunfire erupted from a compound 300 meters to the east, pinning the patrol behind a low stone wall. Miriam had her rifle up before the first soldier hit the ground. Through her scope, she could see muzzle flashes in 2 windows, shooters taking turns to maintain suppressive fire. Monk was beside her, already calculating. 310 meters. Wind from the south, 2 miles per hour. 2 shooters, maybe 3. I see them, Miriam said. She tracked the first window, waiting for the pattern. The shooter would fire, duck, reload, then rise again. Predictable. Fatal. She squeezed the trigger at the exact moment his head appeared. The muzzle flash stopped. 1 down, Monk confirmed. The second shooter panicked. Instead of maintaining cover, he leaned out to see what had happened to his companion. It was the last mistake he ever made. 2 down. The patrol pushed forward while Miriam provided overwatch. 2 more fighters emerged from behind the compound, running for a vehicle. She dropped them both before they covered 10 meters. The engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. 4 kills, 4 shots. When it was over, Hendricks approached her position. His face was unreadable, but something in his eyes had changed. It was not respect. It was something closer to fear. Lucky, he said, but the words sounded hollow even as he spoke it. Miriam ejected her magazine and began reloading. Luck is when you hit something you were not aiming at. Sergeant, I hit exactly what I aimed at. Every time. He had no response. He turned and walked back to the convoy without another word. That night in the operations center, Captain Rawlings read Hendricks' report aloud while First Sergeant Contreras stood in the corner, her expression neutral. For confirmed kills. All documented. All clean shots. Rawlings looked up at Hendricks. This is your assessment, Sergeant. Hendricks stood rigid. It is what happened, sir. And your concerns about accuracy. About inflated numbers. A muscle twitched in Hendricks' jaw. Unfounded, sir. Rawlings nodded slowly. Good. Then I trust we will not hear any more questions about Staff Sergeant Okonkwo's competence. He paused. Dismissed. Outside the operations center, Contreras caught up with Miriam. That was well handled, she said quietly. You forced him to witness the truth and then report it accurately. He could not lie without lying to the captain's face. He will find another way to come at me, Miriam replied. Probably. Contreras studied her for a moment. When I was a young sergeant, there was a master sergeant who made it his mission to end my career. He filed false reports, sabotaged my evaluations, spread rumors. He did everything he could to break me. What happened? I outlasted him. She smiled, but there was steel behind it. I was better than him, and eventually everyone knew it. The lies could not survive the truth. She put a hand on Miriam's shoulder. You are better than Hendricks. Everyone is starting to see it. Just keep doing what you are doing. Miriam nodded. Thank you, First Sergeant. Over the next month, her reputation grew beyond the FOB. Intelligence reports mentioned enemy communications referencing a deadly American sniper operating in the valley. They called her the Shadow because she struck without warning and vanished without trace. The name spread through the ranks until even soldiers who had never met her knew the stories. Her kill count reached 32, then 41, then 50. Monk kept meticulous records. Every shot documented, every kill confirmed. He had stopped questioning her abilities weeks ago. Now he simply marveled at them. You know they are scared of you, he said one evening as they cleaned their weapons. The enemy, I mean. We intercepted radio chatter last night. They think you're a ghost. Some kind of spirit. Miriam did not look up from her rifle. Good. Fear keeps them cautious. Cautious keeps them visible. The other snipers at the FOB had begun to change their attitude as well. Sergeant Marcus Cole, who had been neutral since her arrival, started sitting with her at chow. He asked questions about her technique, her training, the way she controlled her breathing. She answered without arrogance, sharing what she knew because knowledge shared made the whole unit stronger. Even some of Hendricks' allies began to distance themselves. It was subtle at first. Fewer laughs at his jokes about her. Fewer nods when he dismissed her skills. The tide was turning, and everyone could feel it. Everyone except Hendricks. He had grown quieter over the weeks, but Miriam knew better than to interpret silence as surrender. Men like him did not give up. They adapted. They waited for better opportunities. She found out what he was planning on a Tuesday afternoon. She was passing the operations center when she heard voices through the thin plywood wall. Hendricks and Captain Rawlings discussing the next week's assignments. The Keringal mission Hendricks was saying. His voice had that tone again, the false concern that masked something darker. It is a two-sniper operation. High risk. I should take Cole as my partner. He has more experience. Rawlings responded. Okonkwo has the highest kill count in the battalion. With respect, sir, kill count is not everything. The Karengal is different. We need someone who has been there before. Someone who knows the terrain. A pause. I am not saying she is incompetent. I am saying this particular mission requires a specific skill set. Miriam waited, her heart steady despite what she was hearing. This was it. The new angle. He could not deny her skills anymore. So instead, he would exclude her from the missions where those skills could shine. Fine, Rawlings said finally. Cole goes with you on Karengal. Okonkwo can run Overwatch on the supply convoy. Supply convoy. Routine. Boring. Invisible. Thank you, sir, Hendricks said. I think that is the right call. Miriam stepped away from the wall before they emerged. Her face revealed nothing, but inside, the fire burned hotter than ever. He had found a new way to bury her. Keep her away from the action, assign her to missions that would never make reports, let her skills rust while he claimed the glory. But Hendricks had made a mistake. He thought she would accept the assignment quietly. He thought she would follow orders and fade into the background. He did not know her at all. That night, she requested a meeting with First Sergeant Contreras. And when she walked into that office, she carried with her a plan that would change everything. First Sergeant Contreras listened without interrupting. Miriam laid out everything. The sabotaged rifle, the whisper campaigns, the attempts to discredit her kills, and now the systematic exclusion from meaningful missions. When she finished, Contreras was quiet for a long moment. I believe you, she said finally. But believing is not the same as proving. Hendricks has been careful. There is no paper trail, no witnesses who will speak against him. If I go to the captain with accusations, it becomes your word against his. And he has 12 years of service backing his word. So I just accept it, Miriam asked. I'll let him bury me on convoy duty while he takes credit for missions I should be running. No, Contreras leaned forward. You do what soldiers have always done when the system fails them. You make yourself so valuable that ignoring you becomes impossible. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. There's a mission coming up. 1 week from now, a high-value target has been identified in the valley. Someone the intelligence community has been hunting for months. Miriam opened the folder. Inside was a photograph of a man with hard eyes and a graying beard. The name beneath the photo was Rashid Karimi. Codename, the Hawk. He commands the largest insurgent network in Paktika province. Contreras continued. He is responsible for dozens of American deaths. Taking him out would be the most significant kill of the entire deployment. She paused. Hendricks does not know about this yet. The intelligence just came in this morning. I am the one who decides which sniper team gets assigned. Miriam looked up. You would give this to me. I would give this to the best shooter we have. Contreras held her gaze. That happens to be you. But I need to know you understand what this means. If you take this mission and succeed, Hendricks will never be able to deny your value again. But if you fail, if you miss the shot or the mission goes wrong, he will use it to destroy you. There will be no coming back. Miriam studied the photograph. The Hawk. The man who had killed her fellow soldiers. The man who had ordered attacks on civilians. The man who represented everything she had joined the army to fight against. I will not fail, she said. The week that followed was the longest of her life. She trained with Monk every day, studying the terrain where the Hawk was expected to appear, calculating wind patterns and elevation changes, preparing for a shot that might be the most important of her career. She told no one else about the mission. Contreras had made it clear that secrecy was essential. But secrets had a way of leaking on a small FOB. 3 days before the mission, Miriam returned to her quarters to find her equipment scattered again. This time the violation was more thorough. Her notes were rifled through, her maps disturbed. Someone had been looking for information. She checked her rifle immediately. The weapon was untouched, but that was almost worse. It meant whoever had searched her quarters had been looking for something else. Something like mission details. That night she found Monk in the chow hall and pulled him aside. Someone knows, she said quietly. They searched my quarters. Monk's face darkened. Hendricks. Who else? She kept her voice low. He must have heard something. Seen something. Maybe he noticed Contreras giving me extra attention. What do? We proceed as planned. She met his eyes. If we change anything now, he wins. We go in 3 days, we take the shot, and we come back with a hawk's head on a platter. Metaphorically speaking. And if he tries to sabotage the mission, then we will deal with it when it happens. The night before the mission, Miriam could not sleep. She lay in her bunk, running through the operation in her mind, visualizing every step from insertion to extraction. She must have drifted off eventually because the dream came without warning. She was back in Ramadi. Her first deployment. The city stretched out before her, burning. She was on a rooftop, rifle in hand, watching a street below where civilians were running. Among them, she saw a fighter raising a weapon toward a group of children. She had the shot. Set her mass. Easy, but her finger would not move. She watched, frozen, as the fighter opened fire. The children fell. The screaming started. And still she could not move, could not breathe, could not do anything but watch as people died because she had hesitated. She woke gasping, her body drenched in sweat. The quarters were dark and silent. She was alone with the memory she had buried for 2 years. Ramadi, the day she had frozen. The day her hesitation had cost lives. She had never told anyone. Not her commanders, not her fellow soldiers, not even Monk. She had buried it so deep, she almost convinced herself it had not happened. But the truth was always there, waiting in the darkness. Never again. She had made that promise to herself on a rooftop in Ramadi, covered in the blood of people she had failed to save. Never again would she hesitate. Never again would she let fear override her training. That promise had made her the deadliest sniper in her battalion. It had driven her to perfection because perfection was the only way to atone for the lives she had failed to save. Tomorrow she would face the hawk. Tomorrow she would prove that the woman who had frozen in Ramadi no longer existed. Tomorrow she would show everyone, including herself, that she had become something new, something that never missed, something that never hesitated, something that never failed. She did not sleep again that night. She lay in the darkness, eyes open, counting her heartbeats until dawn. When the sun rose over the mountains, she was already at the armory, checking her rifle for the final time. Monk found her there, his own gear ready, his face set with determination. "You good?" he asked. She chambered around and felt the familiar weight of the weapon in her hands. "I am ready," she said, and for the first time in 2 years, she believed it. They moved out at 0600, disappearing into the mountains before the FOB fully woke. Behind them, unnoticed in the early morning shadows, another figure watched them go. Hendricks lowered his binoculars and smiled. He did not know where they were going, but he knew it was important, and he knew exactly who to tell. The hide site was a shallow depression between 2 boulders on the eastern ridge, overlooking a village where intelligence indicated the hawk would appear for a meeting with his commanders. Miriam and Monk had been in position for 6 hours, motionless, watching. The shot would be difficult. 900 meters across a valley, with unpredictable thermals rising from the rocky floor. The window would be small, maybe seconds, when the hawk moved between buildings. One chance. No margin for error. Monk scanned the village through his spotter scope, calling out movements. 3 guards at the northern entrance. 2 more on the rooftops. Vehicles arriving from the west. Miriam watched it all through her rifle scope, building a mental map of the patterns. Who moved where? How long between patrols? Where the shadows fell as the sun tracked across the sky. Then she saw him. The hawk emerged from the largest building in the village center, surrounded by 4 bodyguards. He was smaller than she expected, almost frail-looking, but he moved with the confidence of a man who had killed without consequence for years. He gestured to his men, issuing orders, completely unaware that death was watching from the ridge above. "I have him," Miriam whispered. Monk confirmed the distance. 920 meters. Wind southwest at 4 miles per hour. He is moving toward the courtyard. She tracked the hawk through her scope, waiting for him to stop, waiting for the moment between heartbeats when a shot would be perfect. He paused at the entrance to the courtyard, turned to speak to one of his commanders. Now, her finger tightened on the trigger, and then the radio exploded with noise. All units, all units. This is Warrior Base. We have reports of a sniper team operating without authorization in Sector 12. All patrols converge on their position immediately. Apprehend and return to base. Miriam froze. The transmission had come through on the open channel, the one monitored by everyone on the FOB, including, she realized with horror, the enemy. Below in the village, the hawk's head snapped up. Someone was shouting, pointing toward the ridge. They had intercepted the transmission. They knew. Take the shot, Monk hissed. Take it now. But the hawk was already moving, his bodyguards closing around him, rushing him toward cover. The window was closing. She had half a second, maybe less, to make a shot that was already nearly impossible. She fired. The bullet crossed 900 meters in just over a second. It struck the wall 6 inches from the hawk's head as he disappeared through a doorway. She had missed. For the first time in her military career, she had missed a shot that mattered. We need to move, Monk said, already packing his gear. They know we are here. We have maybe 3 minutes before this ridge is swarming with fighters. They ran. There was no other word for it. They abandoned the hide site and sprinted along the ridge toward the extraction point, covering ground as fast as the terrain would allow. Behind them, Miriam could hear shouts from the village. Engines starting, the chaos of a hornet's nest that had been kicked. They made it to the extraction point with seconds to spare. The helicopter was already spinning up when they dove aboard, and they were airborne before the first enemy vehicles crested the ridge. Monk sat across from her, breathing hard, his face a mask of controlled fury. That transmission, he said, it was not authorized. It was not real. I know. Hendricks. It had to be. He must have accessed the radio room, broadcast on the open channel. He knew it would compromise the mission. He knew the enemy would hear. He tried to get us killed. Miriam stared out the helicopter door at the mountains falling away below. Her hand was shaking for the first time in years. Not from fear, from rage. She had missed. The hawk was still alive, and the man responsible was waiting for her back at the FOB, probably already preparing his version of events. When they landed at Warrior, Captain Rawlings was waiting on the pad. His face was thunderous. My office, he said. Both of you. Now. The next hour was the worst of Miriam's career. Rawlings demanded explanations. How had they known about the hawk? Who had authorized the mission? Why had they gone without informing the chain of command? Miriam told the truth. First Sergeant Contreras had assigned the mission based on fresh intelligence. The operation was legitimate. What was not legitimate was the radio transmission that had compromised their position. Rawlings turned to Contreras, who had been summoned midway through the interrogation. Is this true, First Sergeant? Contreras did not hesitate. It is, sir. I assigned Staff Sergeant Okonkwo based on her qualifications. The mission was sound. What happened on that ridge was sabotage. Rawlings was quiet for a long moment. The word you're using is serious, First Sergeant. Do you have proof? Before Contreras could answer, the door opened. Hendricks stepped inside, his face arranged in an expression of concern that made Miriam's stomach turn. Sir, I heard about what happened. I came to see if there was anything I could do to help. Rawlings studied him. Actually, Sergeant, maybe you can. Where were you at 0930 this morning? Hendricks did not miss a beat. The motor pool, sir. Checking vehicles for the convoy tomorrow. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I have a maintenance log right here if you need it. A maintenance log, time-stamped and signed. An alibi prepared in advance. Miriam watched Rawlings accept the document, watch him scan it, and nod. She knew then that nothing would happen. Hendricks had covered his tracks too well. There was no proof, no witnesses, nothing but her word against his. Thank you, Sergeant, Rawlings said. That'll be all. Hendricks left, but not before catching Miriam's eye. The look he gave her was pure triumph. After everyone else was dismissed, Contreras held Miriam back. I am sorry, she said quietly. I should have anticipated this. I should have protected the mission better. It is not your fault. Miriam replied. Her voice was flat, empty. He has been planning this for months. Building alibis. Covering tracks. She looked at Contreras. He will never stop. No matter what I do, no matter how good I am, he will always find a way to undermine me. Contreras was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed everything. There is one way he cannot undermine you. She met Miriam's eyes. Become so valuable that removing you would hurt the mission more than keeping you. Become indispensable. She paused. The hawk is still out there. And after today, he knows your face. He will be hunting you now as much as you are hunting him. Good, Miriam said. The fire was returning, burning away the despair. Let him hunt. Let them all hunt. She would not miss again. The weeks after the failed mission were the bloodiest of the deployment. The hawk, emboldened by his survival and enraged by the attempt on his life, launched a campaign of violence across the valley. Ambushes on convoys, mortar attacks on outposts, IEDs buried in roads that American vehicles had traveled safely for months. The FOB went a high alert, and every soldier felt the weight of what was coming. Miriam responded the only way she knew how. She became death itself. Every patrol that left the wire, she volunteered for. Every observation post that needed a sniper, she was there. She stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night, stopped eating full meals, stopped doing anything that was not directly related to putting rounds through enemy fighters. Her kill count climbed. 63, 71, 84, 89. Monk watched her with growing concern. They were on the ridge overlooking the Eastern Pass, 12 hours into an Overwatch mission, when he finally spoke. You're going to burn out, he said quietly. No one can keep this pace forever. Miriam did not take her eye from the scope. I am fine. You're not fine. You have lost weight. Your hands are starting to shake when you're not shooting. He paused. I have seen soldiers push themselves like this before. It does not end well. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, still watching the pass below, she began to speak. When I was 8 years old, my father lost his job at the auto plant in Detroit. We had nothing. No savings, no family to help, nothing but a house we could not afford and 3 kids who needed to eat. She adjusted her scope slightly. My grandfather lived up north, near Grayling. He was a hunter, the real kind, not the weekend warriors who come up from the city. He survived on what he killed. Monk listened without interrupting. My mother sent me to live with him for a year. She said it was because she could not afford to feed all 3 of us, but I think she knew I was different. I was always different. Too quiet. Too still. The other kids thought I was strange. She paused. My grandfather understood me. He taught me to hunt. Not for sport. For survival. We would go out in January, 20 below zero, and sit in a blind for 10 hours waiting for a deer. He taught me that patience was not passive. It was the most active thing a person could do. Waiting for the exact, right moment to act. Is that where you learn to shoot like you do? Miriam nodded slowly. He had an old rifle, a 30-06 that had belonged to his father. He taught me to feel the shot before I took it, to know where the bullet would go before it left the barrel. She finally looked at Monk. He died when I was 16. Heart attack, alone in his cabin. They did not find him for a week. She paused. I enlisted 2 years later, after my father died too. I needed to support my mother and my sister. But I also needed to be somewhere that my particular skills would matter. Where being quiet and still and patient was not strange. Where it was valuable. Monk was quiet for a long time. Then he said, that is why you push so hard. You are still trying to prove that the girl everyone thought was strange actually had something to offer. Miriam did not answer. She did not need to. That night, back at the FOB, Monk found her cleaning her rifle in the sniper bay. The other shooters had cleared out, leaving them alone. I owe you an apology, he said. She looked up. For what? When you first arrived, I was skeptical. Not because you were a woman, though I know that is what everyone assumed. I was skeptical because I had seen too many shooters with impressive range scores fall apart in combat. He sat down across from her. But you're not like them. You're not like anyone I have ever worked with. And I should have trusted that from the beginning. Miriam considered his words. You came around faster than most. That does not make it right. He leaned forward. I want you to know something. Whatever happens from here, whatever Hendricks tries, I have your back. Not because you're my shooter, because you're the best soldier I have ever served with. And because you're my friend. It was the first time anyone on the deployment had used that word with her. Friend. Such a simple thing, but in this place, surrounded by people who wanted her to fail, it meant everything. Thank you, Jerome, she said. It was the first time she had used his real name. He smiled. Now get some sleep. Intel says the Hawk is moving fighters into the valley. Big push coming. We're going to need you rested. She nodded and began packing up her rifle. But before Monk reached the door, she stopped him. That story I told you on the ridge. About my grandfather. I have never told anyone that before. He turned back. Why not? Because it is the only thing I have that is just mine. The only part of me that no one can take or twist or use against me. She met his eyes. I told you because I trust you. Do not make me regret it. Monk held her gaze. Never, he said, and she believed him. The next morning, the FOB buzzed with activity. Intelligence had confirmed what they feared. The Hawk was massing fighters in the valley, preparing an assault larger than anything they had seen. Estimates range from 150 to 200 armed insurgents, heavily equipped, coordinating for a major attack. In the operations center, Colonel Harrison addressed the assembled soldiers. His face was grim. They are coming for us, he said. 2 days, maybe 3. We have called for reinforcements, but they will not arrive in time for the initial assault. We hold with what we have. He pointed to the map on the wall, specifically to the twin peaks overlooking the valley. This is our key terrain. If we hold the high ground, we control the approaches. If we lose it, they overrun the FOB. He turned to look directly at Miriam. Staff Sergeant Okonkwo, you and your spotter will take position on the eastern peak. You will be our eyes and our primary interdiction asset. Miriam stood at attention. Understood, sir. Harrison held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. I have read your file, Staff Sergeant. I know what you are capable of. In 2 days, I need you to be everything that file says you are. He paused. The Hawk will be there personally. He wants this victory. He wants to be the one who takes this FOB. Good, Miriam said. Then I will know exactly where to aim. The colonel almost smiled. Dismissed. As the soldiers filed out, Miriam caught Hendricks watching her from across the room. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes had shifted. It was not triumph anymore. It was not even hatred. It was fear. He knew what was coming. He knew that in 2 days, the woman he had tried so hard to destroy would have the chance to prove herself in ways that could never be denied. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. The climb to the eastern peak took 4 hours in the darkness before dawn. Miriam and Monk moved in silence, carrying enough ammunition and supplies to hold position for 72 hours. The wait was brutal, but neither complained. They both understood what was at stake. The position they established was a natural fortress. A cluster of boulders formed a semicircle facing the valley, providing cover from 3 directions while offering clear sight lines across the entire approach to the FOB. Miriam set up her rifle while Monk arranged their supplies and established communication with the operations center below. Comms check, he said into the radio. Overwatch 1 in position. The response crackled back. Copy Overwatch 1. All units report ready. Enemy movement expected within 12 hours. 12 hours of waiting. Miriam settled into the stillness her grandfather had taught her, letting her body become part of the mountain, letting her mind empty of everything except the scope in front of her. Monk watched her for a while, then pulled out a small notebook and began writing. She had seen him do this before, but had never asked about it. Letters, he said, noticing her glance. To my mother. In case. She nodded. She understood the in case. Every soldier did. The hours passed slowly. The sun climbed over the mountains, baking the rocks until the air shimmered with heat. They drank water sparingly, ate nothing, spoke only when necessary. Below them, the FOB was a hive of activity, soldiers reinforcing positions, checking weapons, preparing for what was coming. At 1400 hours, Monk spotted the first movement. Contact, he said quietly. South Ridge. Single file column moving through the pass. Miriam swung her scope to the location. She counted 12 fighters, armed with rifles and RPGs, moving with the discipline of men who had done this before. The vanguard. I have them, she said. Range, 1,100 meters. Wind negligible. She tracked the lead fighter, waiting for him to pause, waiting for the moment. He stopped to signal the men behind him. She fired. The fighter dropped. The column scattered, but there was nowhere to hide on that exposed ridge. She worked the bolt and fired again, and again, and again, for down before they found cover. The survivors retreated back through the pass, dragging their wounded. First blood, Monk said. First of many, Miriam replied. The probing attacks continued through the afternoon. Small groups testing the defenses, looking for weaknesses. Each time they approached the valley, Miriam was waiting. Her kill count for the day reached 23 before sunset. But she knew this was just the beginning. The real assault would come at night. Darkness fell over the mountains like a hell breath. The FOB went to blackout conditions, every light extinguished, every soldier in position. Miriam switched to her night vision scope and continued her watch. At 2200 hours, the valley erupted. They came from 3 directions at once, waves of fighters pouring through the passes like water through broken dams. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. The sound of gunfire became a continuous roar that echoed off the mountains. Miriam fired as fast as she could acquire targets. One shot, one kill. Chamber another round. Find the next target. Fire again. The rhythm became automatic, mechanical, a dance she had rehearsed 1,000 times. Monk called corrections. Left 2 degrees. Range 800. Target moving right to left. She adjusted. She fired. She killed. But there were too many of them. For every fighter she dropped, 2 more appeared. They were pushing toward the FOB's outer perimeter and the soldiers they were struggling to hold. The radio crackled with desperate voices. Sector 3 taking heavy fire. Need reinforcement. Sector 5 perimeter breached. Falling back. Casualties at the aid station. Miriam could not be everywhere. She could not save everyone. All she could do was keep shooting, keep killing, keep thinning the waves before they crashed against the walls of the FOB. Her kill count for the night passed 100, then 110, then 120. Still they came. At 0300, the worst happened. A group of fighters broke through the eastern approach, directly below her position. They were heading for the FOB's fuel depot, and if they reached it, the resulting explosion would be catastrophic. Monk, I need you to spot for the depot approach. Hostiles inbound. He swung his scope down. I count 8. No, 10. They have charges. They're going to blow the fuel. Miriam shifted her aim. The angle was difficult, almost straight down the mountain. The range was only 400 meters, but the steep declination made the shot unpredictable. She fired. 1 down. Chambered. Fired. 2 down. The remaining fighters scattered, but they kept moving toward the depot. She was running out of time. 3 down. 4. 5. The 6th fighter reached the fence around the depot. He was attaching a charge to the wire. Miriam exhaled. Squeezed. The fighter fell with the charge still in his hands. It detonated against the fence, but away from the fuel tanks. The explosion was small, contained. The remaining fighters fled. Monk let out a breath he had been holding. That was too close. But before Miriam could respond, she saw something that made her blood freeze. A new group of fighters was moving up the mountain. Not toward the FOB, toward her position. Someone had finally figured out where the devastating fire was coming from. They were coming to take out the sniper. We have company, she said. Monk looked and swore under his breath. 20 at least. Coming up the eastern slope. She grabbed the radio. Overwatch 1 to base. We have hostiles approaching our position. 20 plus fighters. Request immediate support. The response was not what she wanted to hear. Overwatch 1. All units engaged. No support available at this time. You're on your own. Monk looked at her. His face was pale in the darkness. We cannot hold against 20. Not in this position. Miriam looked at their ammunition. Enough for maybe 50 shots each. She looked at the approaching fighters, their flashlights bobbing as they climbed. She looked at the FOB below, still under assault, still depending on her to provide cover. Then we make every shot count. she said. She settled back behind her rifle and began to aim. The first fighter to crest the ridge died before he knew she was there. The second died reaching for his fallen comrade. The third died trying to find cover that did not exist. But they kept coming, and with each shot, they got closer. Monk dropped his scope and picked up his own rifle. Back to back, they held the peak, firing at shapes in the darkness, counting their remaining rounds, knowing that each trigger pull brought them closer to empty magazines and hand-to-hand combat they could not win. 15 hostiles down, their ammunition at half. 18 down, ammunition at a quarter. The 19th fighter got close enough that Miriam could see his face in the moonlight. Young, terrified, determined to kill her anyway. She shot him between the eyes. 1 round left in her magazine. 2 fighters still coming. Monk fired twice. 1 went down. The other kept coming, screaming, rifle raised. Miriam chambered her last round. The fighter was 10 meters away when she pulled the trigger. He fell at her feet, close enough that his blood splattered across her boots. Silence. Monk slumped against the rocks, gasping for air. His hands were shaking. Miriam realized hers were too. The radio crackled. Overwatch 1, status report. She picked up the handset. Her voice was steady despite everything. Overwatch 1, position secure. 20 hostiles neutralized. She paused. We need ammunition resupply. Immediately. Below, the assault on the FOB was finally breaking. The fighters were retreating, dragging their dead, leaving behind a valley littered with bodies. Dawn was coming, and with it, the first rays of light on a battlefield that would be talked about for years. Miriam looked at Monk. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything. There was nothing to say. They had held the peak. They had survived the night. But the battle was not over. Somewhere in that valley, the Hawk was still alive, and he would be back. The ammunition resupply arrived at dawn, carried by 2 soldiers who looked at Miriam and Monk like they were seeing ghosts. The eastern peak was littered with bodies, 20 fighters who had climbed the mountain expecting to kill a sniper and found something else entirely. Word had already spread to the FOB. The soldiers who brought the ammunition could not stop staring. "They're calling you the Angel," one of them said. "Down at the base. They say you saved the fuel depot. Killed over 100 last night." Miriam did not respond. She was already reloading her magazines, preparing for what she knew was coming. The Hawk had thrown everything he had at the FOB and failed. He would not accept that failure. He would come again, and this time, he would come personally. Monk finished checking his scope and moved back into position. "You should rest," he told her. "I could take first watch." She shook her head. "He is out there. I can feel it. Today is the day." The morning passed in tense silence. Below, the FOB was assessing damage and treating wounded. The attack had been costly. 17 Americans dead, dozens more injured. But the perimeter had held, and the enemy losses were catastrophic. Intelligence estimated over 80 fighters killed, with dozens more wounded. 80 of those kills belonged to Miriam. At noon, the radio crackled with new intelligence. Enemy forces regrouping in the village of Zormat. Satellite imagery shows heavy vehicle activity. Assessment is they're preparing for a second assault. Miriam looked at Monk. Zormat was the same village where she had missed the Hawk weeks ago. The same village where Hendrik's sabotage had cost her the shot. "He is there," she said. "I know he is." The colonel's voice came over the radio. "All units prepare for defensive positions. Second assault expected within 6 hours." But Miriam was not thinking about defense. She was thinking about a shot she had missed, a target she had let escape, a man who had killed 17 Americans last night because she had not been able to stop him when she had a chance. She picked up the radio. "Overwatch 1 to command. Request permission to relocate to Observation Point Delta. Better angle on Zormat." There was a pause. Then the colonel's voice. "Explain your reasoning, Staff Sergeant. If the Hawk is coordinating from Zormat, I can interdict him before the assault begins. Cut off the head and the body dies." She paused. "I can end this today, sir, but I need a better position." Another pause, longer this time. Finally, the colonel spoke. "Approved. But Okonkwo, if you're wrong about this, you will be out of position when the assault hits. The eastern peak will be undefended." "I'm not wrong, sir." She and Monk moved out within the hour, traversing the ridge to a secondary position that offered a direct line of sight to Zormat. The distance was extreme, over 1,000 meters, with crosswinds and heat shimmer that would make any shot nearly impossible. But nearly impossible was not the same as impossible. They settled into position at 1400 hours. Monk began scanning the village while Miriam calculated her adjustments. Wind, elevation, temperature, humidity. Every variable accounted for, every factor considered. 3 hours passed. The sun began its descent toward the mountains. The assault would come at dusk, just like before. Then Monk inhaled sharply. Movement. Center of the village. Multiple vehicles arriving. Miriam swung her scope to the location. She saw trucks, fighters dismounting, a flurry of activity around the largest building. And then, emerging from one of the vehicles, she saw him. The Hawk. He was barking orders, gesturing toward the valley, clearly preparing his forces for the coming attack. He moved with the arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. I have him, Miriam whispered. Range 1,040 meters, Monk said. Wind from the west at 6 miles per hour. He is moving toward the building. She tracked him through her scope, waiting for the moment. He was surrounded by bodyguards again, never staying still, never giving her a clean shot. Come on, she breathed. Stop moving. The radio crackled. Overwatch 1. We have visual on enemy forces massing in the southern pass. Assault imminent. What is your status? She did not respond. Every fiber of her being was focused on the man in her crosshairs. The Hawk stopped at the entrance to the building. He turned to address his commanders, his back to the valley, completely exposed. Now, her finger tightened on the trigger, and then she saw Hendricks. He was there, in her peripheral vision, moving through the rocks 50 meters to her left. He must have followed them from the FOB. He was carrying a rifle, and it was pointed at her. Miriam, Monk hissed. He had seen it too. Time slowed. She had a fraction of a second to make a choice. Take the shot at the Hawk and risk Hendricks killing her before she could chamber another round. Or shift her aim to Hendricks and lose the Hawk forever. The Hawk was already moving toward the door. In 2 seconds, he would be gone. Hendricks was raising his rifle. In 2 seconds, he would fire. She made her choice. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet crossed 1,000 meters in just over a second. It struck the Hawk in the center of his back as he stepped through the doorway. He fell forward, dead before he hit the ground. Miriam rolled left as Hendricks fired. The round struck the rock where her head had been a moment before. She came up with her sidearm drawn, but Monk was faster. He tackled Hendricks from behind, driving him into the ground. The rifle went flying. Monk pinned him down, knee on his spine, hands wrenching his arms behind his back. It is over, Monk shouted. It is over, Hendricks. Hendricks struggled, but he was no match for Monk's weight and leverage. He went still, breathing hard, face pressed into the dirt. Miriam approached slowly, her pistol still raised. She looked down at the man who had tried to destroy her career, who had sabotaged her equipment, who had tried to get her killed, who had just tried to murder her in cold blood. Why, she asked. Her voice was calm, almost curious. Why do you hate me so much? Hendricks turned his head to look at her. His eyes were wild, desperate. Because you are better than me, he spat. Because you walked in here and made everything I worked for look like nothing. Because every time you pull that trigger, you prove that I am not what I thought I was. Miriam stared at him for a long moment. Then she holstered her pistol. You are right, she said. I am better than you. But not because I shoot better. Because I never let my fear make me cruel. She turned to Monk. Secure him. We will let command sort this out. The radio was exploding with chatter. The Hawk is down. Repeat, the Hawk is down. Enemy forces in disarray. Assault is breaking up. Miriam picked up the handset. Overwatch 1 to command. Target neutralized. She looked at Hendricks, pinned in the dirt. And we have a prisoner who needs to answer some questions. The colonel's voice came back, incredulous. Staff Sergeant, did you just take out the Hawk at over 1,000 meters? She allowed herself the smallest smile. 1,040 meters, sir. But who is counting? In the valley below, the enemy assault was collapsing. Fighters who had been preparing to attack were now fleeing, their leader dead, their command structure shattered. The FOB would not fall today. And on a rocky outcrop overlooking it all, Miriam finally let herself breathe. 211 kills. The Hawk was number 211, but she was not done yet. The Hawk's death should have ended it. The enemy forces were in disarray, their command structure shattered, their fighters scattering into the mountains. But war does not follow scripts, and the men who had followed the Hawk were not ready to accept defeat. The counterattack came at dusk. It was not organized. It was not strategic. It was rage given form. Dozens of fighters charging toward the FOB in a suicidal wave of vengeance for their fallen leader. They came screaming, firing wildly, throwing themselves at the perimeter with no regard for their own lives. Miriam was still at observation point Delta when it started. She could see the wave approaching, could count the bodies as they rushed toward the soldiers defending the wire. Overwatch 1 engaging. She set into the radio and began to fire. 212, 213, 214. The kills came fast now, mechanical, each shot finding its target with the precision of a machine. She was no longer thinking about the men she was killing. She was thinking about the soldiers behind that wire, the ones who would die if she missed, the ones who were counting on her to thin the herd before it reached them. 215, 216. Monk spotted beside her, calling corrections she barely needed anymore. Her body knew what to do. Her hands knew. Her eyes knew. She had become the weapon her grandfather had always seen in her, the perfect instrument of distant death. 217. The wave was breaking. Fighters were falling faster than they could advance. The ones who survived were retreating, dragging wounded, abandoning their suicidal charge. And then she saw him. A fighter had broken through the wire on the eastern side. He was running toward the aid station where the wounded from last night's attack were being treated. In his hands, he carried a vest packed with explosives. Monk saw him too. Suicide bombe. 400 meters. He is going for the aid station. Miriam shifted her aim. The distance was short, the angle awkward. The bomber was running in a zigzag pattern, making himself a difficult target. She had one chance. She exhaled, felt her heartbeat slow, found the space between beats where the world went still. The bomber was 50 meters from the aid station when she fired. 218. He went down hard, the vest detonating on impact, but far enough from the building that the blast only shattered windows. Inside, wounded soldiers dove for cover, but emerged unharmed. The radio exploded with voices. Aid station secure. Bomber neutralized. Who took that shot? Monk answered for her. Overwatch 1. Staff Sergeant Okonkwo. There was a moment of silence on the channel. Then from somewhere in the chaos below, a single voice spoke. Thank you, Angel. The fighting continued for another hour, sporadic and desperate, the last gasps of an enemy that had already lost. Miriam kept shooting until there was nothing left to shoot at, until the valley fell silent and the only movement was American soldiers securing the perimeter. Her final count for the day was 218 kills. When she and Monk finally descended from the observation point, the FOB was a different place than it had been that morning. Soldiers stopped what they were doing to watch her pass. Some nodded. Some saluted. One young private, his arm in a sling from a wound taken during the night assault, stepped directly into her path. She recognized him. Bep saying when? The nervous kid whose hands had been shaking on her first day at the FOB. You saved my life, he said. His voice was steady now. Last night, when they breached Sector 5, I was pinned down. I saw the fighters coming for me, and then they just started dropping, one after another. He swallowed hard. That was you, was it not? Miriam looked at him. She remembered Sector 5 on the radio, the desperate calls for help, the fighters she had killed without knowing who she was saving. I was just doing my job, she said. No. Nguyen shook his head. You did more than that. He stepped aside to let her pass, but his eyes followed her. We all know what you did, and we will never forget it. The operations center was crowded when she arrived for debriefing. Colonel Harrison stood at the front, flanked by Captain Rawlings and First Sergeant Contreras. Hendricks was notably absent, confined to quarters pending investigation. Staff Sergeant Okonkwo, Harrison said as she entered. The room fell silent. I have been in the Army for 31 years. I have seen a lot of soldiers do a lot of remarkable things. But I have never seen anything like what you did over the past 48 hours. He picked up a folder from the table. 218 confirmed kills. A high-value target eliminated at over 1,000 meters. A suicide bomber stopped 50 meters from an aid station full of wounded. He set the folder down. You single-handedly broke the back of the largest enemy assault this province has seen in 3 years. Miriam stood at attention. I had help, sir. Specialist Washington was with me every step. Harrison nodded, and he will be recognized for his contributions. But make no mistake, Staff Sergeant, what you accomplished was extraordinary. He paused. I am recommending you for the Bronze Star with Valor Device. It will not be the last recognition you receive for this deployment. Thank you, sir. There is one more thing. Harrison's expression softened slightly. Sergeant First Class Hendricks has confessed to multiple counts of sabotage, conduct unbecoming, and attempted murder. He will face court-martial when we return stateside. He looked at her. I understand he made your time here difficult. Difficult? Such a small word for what Hendricks had put her through. The sabotaged rifle, the stolen credit, the radio transmission that nearly got her killed, the attempted murder on the ridge. He made his choices, sir, Miriam said. Now he faces the consequences. Harrison nodded slowly. Dismissed, Staff Sergeant. Get some rest. You have earned it. She turned to leave, but Contreras caught her arm at the door. 218, the first sergeant said quietly. Do you know what that number means? Miriam shook her head. It means you have more confirmed kills than any sniper currently serving in the United States Army. Contreras smiled. They were wrong about you, Okonkwo. Every single one of them. And now the whole world knows it. That night, Miriam sat alone on the roof of her quarters, looking out at the valley where so much blood had been spilled. The stars were bright, the air cold, the silence almost peaceful. Monk found her there an hour later. He sat down beside her without speaking, and for a long time, they just watched the darkness together. 218, he said finally. How does it feel? She considered the question. Heavy, she said. It feels heavy. He nodded. That is how it should feel. He paused. But you should also feel proud. You saved a lot of lives these past 2 days. American lives. Innocent lives. She looked at him. Is that what they will remember? The lives I saved, or the lives I took? Monk was quiet for a moment. Then he said, they will remember both, and they will call you Angel, because that is what you were to the people in that aid station, to P.F. Nguyen, to everyone behind that wire. He put a hand on her shoulder. You were their angel of deliverance. Miriam looked back at the stars. Angel, she said softly. I suppose there are worse things to be called. In the distance, the first light of dawn was beginning to touch the peaks of the mountains. A new day was coming, and somewhere in the valley, the war continued. But for now, for this moment, there was peace. 218 kills, and the deployment was not over yet. The weeks following the battle were strange. The enemy had been broken so completely that patrols returned without contact. The valley that had been a killing ground fell quiet. Soldiers who had grown accustomed to the constant tension of combat found themselves with nothing to do but wait for their deployment to end. Miriam used the time to process what she had become. 218 confirmed kills. The number followed her everywhere. It was whispered in the chow hall, mentioned in radio traffic, written in reports that would be read by generals and historians. She had become a legend, and legends were heavy things to carry. The Bronze Star ceremony was held on a Tuesday morning. The entire company assembled in formation under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Colonel Harrison pinned the medal to her chest while the soldiers watched in silence. For extraordinary heroism in combat, Harrison read from the citation. Staff Sergeant Miriam Okonkwo distinguished herself through exceptional valor and tactical brilliance during sustained enemy assault on Forward Operating Base Warrior. Her actions directly resulted in the elimination of over 200 enemy combatants and the neutralization of a high-value target, saving countless American and Allied lives. The words sounded like they were describing someone else. Some hero from a story, not a woman who still woke up at night counting the faces of the men she had killed. After the ceremony, Soldiers lined up to shake her hand. Some she knew, most she did not, but they all looked at her the same way, with a mixture of awe and something else, something that might have been fear. Sergeant Marcus Cole was among them, the sniper who had started neutral and ended as an ally. He gripped her hand firmly and met her eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said. "When you first got here, I did not think you belonged. I was wrong." He paused. "You are the best shooter I have ever seen. And more than that, you are a good soldier. I am proud to have served with you." "Thank you, Marcus," she said. "That means more than the medal." He nodded and moved on, but his words stayed with her. That afternoon, she found Hendricks. He was in the detention area, a small room with a cot and a locked door, waiting for transport back to the States and the court-martial that would end his career. She had not planned to visit him. Her feet had simply carried her there, and when the guard asked if she wanted to go inside, she heard herself say yes. Hendricks looked up when she entered. He was smaller than she remembered, diminished somehow, the arrogance drained out of him. He did not stand. "Come and gloat?" he asked. His voice was flat, defeated. Miriam studied him for a long moment. "No," she said. "I came to understand." "Understand what?" "Why you did it." She sat down on the single chair across from his cot. "You said I was better than you, that I made everything you worked for look like nothing. But that is not the whole truth, is it?" Hendricks was silent. "I read your file," Miriam continued. "Fallujah, 2004. You were on Overwatch when your squad got ambushed. You had the shot on the machine gunner who was pinning them down, and you missed." His jaw tightened. "3 soldiers died that day," she said. "Men you knew, men who trusted you to protect them. And you have been carrying that weight ever since." "You do not know anything about it," Hendricks said, but his voice cracked. "I know more than you think." She leaned forward. "I froze once too. My first deployment. People died because I hesitated." She paused. "The difference between us is what we did with that guilt. I used it to become better. You used it to tear down anyone who reminded you of your failure." Hendricks stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, something in his expression changed. The hardness crumbled, and beneath it she saw exhaustion, regret, pain that had been festering for years. "I used to be good," he said quietly. "Before Fallujah, I was one of the best. And then I missed that shot, and 3 men died, and I have never been the same." He looked at his hands. "Every time I saw you shoot, every time you hit something I could not, it was like watching proof that I was broken, that I would never be what I used to be." Miriam nodded slowly. "So you try to break me instead. I thought if you failed, it would mean I was not the problem, that the job was just too hard for some people." He laughed bitterly. "But you did not fail. You just kept getting better. And the more you succeeded, the more I hated you for it." She stood up. "You will go to prison," she said. "You will lose everything you built. But that does not have to be the end of your story." She paused at the door. "You can still choose what comes next. You can still find a way to be better than your worst moment." Hendricks looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. "Why are you telling me this? After everything I did to you?" "Because I know what it is like to carry guilt that heavy," Miriam said. "And because destroying you will not undo what you did. Only you can do that." She left without looking back. That night, First Sergeant Contreras found her at the observation post where she had spent so many hours watching the valley. The older woman sat down beside her and produced 2 cups of coffee from somewhere. "I heard you visited Hendricks," Contreras said. Miriam accepted the coffee. "Word travels fast. On a small FOB, there are no secrets." Contreras took a sip. "What made you go?" Miriam considered the question. "I needed to know if he was a monster or just a man," she said finally. "Monsters are easy. You kill them and move on. But men are complicated. Men can be redeemed." "And what did you decide?" "That he is a man. A broken one, but still a man." Contreras nodded. "That is a generous conclusion, given what he did to you." "Generosity has nothing to do with it," Miriam said. "I cannot control what he did. I can only control what I do. And I choose not to carry hatred for him. It is too heavy, and I already have enough weight to bear." The 2 women sat in silence, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter was approaching the FOB, its rotors thumping against the night air. "Orders came through today," Contreras said. "We are going home." 2 weeks. Miriam felt something shift in her chest. Home. The word seemed foreign after so many months in the mountains. She was not sure she knew what home meant anymore. What will you do when you get back? Contreras asked. Miriam thought about her sister Esther in her nursing scrubs, about the mother she had not seen in 8 months, about a world without gunfire and kill counts and the constant weight of death. I do not know, she admitted. Learn how to be a person again, I suppose. Contreras smiled. You never stopped being a person, Okonkwo. You just learned how to be a warrior, too. She stood up and put a hand on Miriam's shoulder. The hard part is not becoming a warrior. The hard part is remembering you were always more than that. She walked away, leaving Miriam alone with the night and the stars and the silence of a valley that had finally stopped bleeding. 2 weeks until home. 2 weeks until she would have to face a world that knew her only as a number. 218 kills. And the story everyone would tell. But Miriam knew the truth. The number was not who she was. It was just what she had done to protect the people who mattered. The final patrol was supposed to be routine. A last sweep through the valley before the company packed up and headed home. No enemy contact expected. No danger anticipative. Just a ceremonial goodbye to the terrain that had shaped them all. Miriam almost did not go. She had done enough, everyone said. Let someone else take the last watch. But something pulled her back to the mountains one final time. A need to see it through. A sense that the story was not quite finished. She and Monk took their familiar position on the eastern ridge, overlooking the village of Zormat where the hawk had died. The buildings were quiet now, the streets empty. The war had moved on to other valleys, other provinces, other soldiers. Strange to think it is over, Monk said. He was scanning the village through his scope, more out of habit than necessity. 7 months. Feels like 7 years. Miriam nodded. Time moves differently out here. They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had been through fire together and emerged bonded in ways that civilians would never understand. The sun climbed higher, warming the rocks, making the air shimmer. What are you going to do when you get back? Monk asked. Miriam had been thinking about that question for days. See my family, she said. Help my sister. Eat my mother's cooking. She paused. After that, I do not know. They will want me to teach. Sniper school. Passing on what I learned. You be good at that. Maybe. She adjusted her scope, scanning the empty streets below. Or maybe I need to find out who I am when I'm not looking through crosshairs. Monk smiled. You are Miriam Okonkwo. Daughter. Sister. Friend. Soldier. Angel. He shrugged. The rest you figure out as you go. Before she could respond, movement caught her eye. A vehicle was approaching the village from the south. Not military. A civilian truck, battered and dusty, moving fast. Too fast for normal traffic. Monk saw it too. His posture shifted, the relaxation draining out of him. That does not look right. Miriam tracked the vehicle through her scope. It pulled into the village center and stopped. 4 men climbed out, all armed, all moving with purpose. They began pulling something from the back of the truck. A person, bound and hooded. Monk grabbed the radio. Overwatch 1 to command. We have activity in Zormat. For armed individuals. They appear to have a hostage. The radio crackled. Copy Overwatch 1. Can you identify the hostage? Miriam zoomed in as far as her scope would allow. The hood was pulled off, and she saw the face beneath. A woman. Young. Wearing the tattered remains of clothing that was not Afghan. American, Miriam breathed. Or European. She is Western. The radio exploded. Overwatch 1 confirm. Western hostage in Zormat. Confirmed, Monk said. Female. Early 20s. They're taking her into the central building. Miriam's mind raced. There had been reports of a missing journalist. A French woman who had disappeared near the border 3 weeks ago. Everyone assumed she was dead. She was not dead. She was right there, 1,000 meters away, being dragged into a building by men who would kill her the moment they realized Americans were watching. We need to move, Miriam said. If they get her inside, we lose her. Overwatch 1, command responded. Hold position. We are scrambling a quick reaction force. ETA, 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Far too long. Those men would be gone in 5, vanished into the mountains with their prize. Miriam made a decision. I'm taking a shot, she said. Monk looked at her. Which one? The one holding her. Left side. He is the only thing keeping her upright. I drop him. She falls, creates confusion. We call in coordinates, and the QRF hits them before they can regroup. That is a 1,000-meter shot with a hostage in the kill zone, Monk said. If you miss, you hit her. Miriam did not hesitate. I will not miss. She settled into position. The man was partially obscured by the hostage, only his head and left shoulder visible. The shot required threading a needle, placing the bullet within inches of an innocent woman. 1,012 meters. Wind from the east at 3 miles per hour. Monk's voice was steady, professional, trusting her completely. Miriam exhaled, found the stillness, felt the bullet's path before she pulled the trigger. She fired. The man's head snapped back. He crumpled, releasing the hostage, who fell to the ground and immediately began crawling toward cover. The other 3 fighters spun, confused, looking for the source of the shot. Target down, Monk confirmed. Hostage is moving. She is alive. Miriam was already on a radio. Command, target neutralized. Hostage is loose. I need that QRF now. The next 20 minutes were chaos. The fighters tried to recapture the hostage. Miriam kept them pinned, killing one more when he got too close to the crawling woman. The remaining 2 fled into the mountains as helicopter rotors thundered over the ridge. The QRF landed in Zormat 12 minutes after a shot. They found the hostage huddled behind a stone wall, bruised and dehydrated, but alive. They found 2 dead fighters and evidence that suggested more hostages might have been held in the building. They found a woman who had been hours away from execution. On the ridge, Miriam lowered her rifle for the last time. 219, Monk said quietly. That is the count. She nodded. 219. And the last one had saved a life instead of just taking one's. That evening, the FOB held an impromptu gathering. Word had spread about the hostage rescue, about the impossible shot that had freed a woman from certain death. The French journalist was being treated at the aid station, already asking to thank the soldier who had saved her. Miriam avoided the celebration. She found her way to the observation post one final time, watching the sun set over the mountains that had forged her into something new. Contreras found her there, as she always did. The journalist wants to meet you, the first sergeant said. She is calling you her guardian angel. Miriam smiled faintly. That name seems to be sticking. It fits. Contreras sat down beside her. 219 kills. More than any active sniper in the army. And your last one saved an innocent life. She paused. That is a legacy, Okonkwo. That is something that will outlive both of us. Miriam was quiet for a long moment. When I got here, she said finally, someone said I would never make it. That I did not belong. That I would fail. I remember, Contreras said. Miriam looked at her. I want you to know something. I did not do this to prove them wrong. I did it because it was right. Because I had the skills to protect people. And protecting people is what soldiers do. She paused. The doubters, the haters, the ones who try to break me. They were never my motivation. They were just obstacles. My motivation was always the person next to me. The soldier counting on me to watch their back. The innocent caught in the crossfire. Contreras nodded slowly. That is why you are different, she said. That is why they call you Angel. Not because of what you can do, because of why you do it. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Tomorrow they would begin packing up. In a week, they would be on a plane heading home. In a month, Miriam would be standing in her mother's kitchen, trying to remember how to be a daughter instead of a warrior. But tonight, she was still Staff Sergeant Miriam Okonkwo, the shadow, the angel of Paktika, the woman who never missed, the woman they said would never make it. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, or tell us about a time when someone underestimated you and lived to regret it. Monk appeared beside her as the last light faded. He did not speak. He simply stood there, her spotter, her friend, her witness to everything she had become. She looked at him and smiled. Let's go home, she said. And together, they walked down from the mountain for the last time, leaving behind the valley, the war, and the ghosts of 219 men who had learned too late what she was capable of. The girl from Detroit, who everyone said would never make it. The angel who proved them all wrong.